This is not just a video. This is a wake-up call. A call that shakes you as a son, as a daughter, as a mother, as a brother, as an African. A call that forces you to confront the truth we keep sweeping under the rug. Because somewhere in Eldoret, Kenya, a Chinese employer repeatedly assaults his Kenyan worker. Noscham, no fear. No hesitation. He raises his hands again and again, confident in his power, confident in the silence of the system that protects him. And the young man, he does not punch back. He does not raise his voice. He simply dodges, shields himself, and stands with a calmness that feels almost painful to watch. Later, he forgives his attacker, not because justice prevailed, not because dignity was restored, but because survival demanded it. Some call this forgiveness maturity. Others call it submission, but I call it something deeper, a symbol of Africa's new crisis. A crisis where Africans are learning to bow on their own soil. A crisis where economic chains replace colonial chains. A crisis where humiliation hides behind development deals. And before you rush to say it's just one video, remember this: nothing like this is isolated. Nothing. Just weeks before, Angola erupted in outrage. Thousands filled the streets. Young people marched with placards held high, shouting one message: the Chinese must leave. Their anger wasn't based on news headlines. It wasn't a theory. It wasn't propaganda. It was daily reality. Humiliation at construction sites, exploitation in mining camps, maltreatment on factory floors, a government that chooses foreign interests over its own citizens. Those young Angolans understood what many African leaders refused to admit. We are trading old colonial masters for new ones. Only this time the chains are made of debt and contracts. Every video we see is only a fragment of the truth. For every beating caught on camera, how many go unrecorded? How many workers suffer in silence because their families depend on the jobs monopolized by Chinese companies? How many fear speaking out because their phones are confiscated at the factory gate? How many remain voiceless in remote mining towns where no journalist ever visits? Africa is being reshaped, not by Africans, but by foreign powers with long-term strategies and short-term mercy. Look at our continent today. From Cairo to Cape Town, from Nairobi to Dar es Salaam, Chinese construction is everywhere. Roads, railways, ports, government complexes, bridges, airports, and our leaders celebrate these projects as symbols of progress. They cut ribbons. They smile for the cameras. They call it partnership. But here is the question Africa is afraid to ask. Who truly owns what is being built? Who will control these roads in 10 years? Who profits from the toll gates? What happens when we cannot repay the billions we owe? Let the numbers speak. China now holds over 20% of Africa's external debt. Djibouti owes China over 70% of its entire GDP. Zambia's debt crisis allowed Chinese companies to gain leverage over national institutions, including the National Broadcasting Corporation and the state power utility. In Kenya, the standard gauge railway operates at a loss, yet the terms of its loan agreement are kept secret, hidden from citizens, hidden even from parliament. Angola was forced to hand over oil fields as collateral. The DRC ships out its minerals to China while Congolese workers struggle for crumbs. This is not development. This is economic colonization wearing a business suit. It does not arrive with guns and Bibles like before. It arrives with PowerPoints, loan agreements, construction machinery, and friendly smiles. The fine print is where the chains are hidden. Kwame Nkrumah warned us about this in the 1960s. Political independence means nothing without economic independence. We didn't listen, and today his warning echoes louder than ever. Africa is independent on paper but economically controlled by the very powers we think are helping us. Because infrastructure is not the problem. Every African wants better roads, better power grids, and better schools. The problem is the terms of these projects. When one foreign power finances everything, when they build everything, when their workers get priority over ours, when their loans are structured to keep us in debt, you do not have a partner, you have a master. The Kenyan worker who accepted the blows understood the truth of power. He knew that justice wasn't built into that workplace. He knew that the man hitting him belonged to a system protected by money, contracts, and geopolitics. He knew fighting back wasn't an option. And suddenly, the entire continent is in that young man's position. Dodging blows, surviving, hoping the next strike won't be fatal. Where are our leaders in all this? Busy flying to Beijing, Brussels, London, Paris, Tokyo, signing contracts they don't read, smiling in photos that hide the cost of our future. Sri Lanka didn't repay its debt, so China took Hambantota to port for 99 years. If it happened to them, why do we believe it cannot happen to us? Professor PLO Lumumba said it clearly. African countries gained political independence but remained economic satellites. Debt became the new weapon. Aid became the new leash. Loans became the new chains. He explained how the IMF and World Bank tightened their grip through budget support, forcing African nations to privatize essential services and surrender their economic autonomy. He warned us that China has mastered this same system, supporting Africa not for charity, but for control. He reminded us that Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere predicted this decades ago, that investors and lenders would be the new colonizers, that debt would be the new battlefield. And here we are, living exactly what they warned us about. Look around you. Foreign security firms guard our banks. Foreign companies deliver our food. Foreign apps run our transportation. Foreign corporations mine our gold, drill our oil, harvest our minerals. Africa is rich, but Africans remain poor, because wealth leaves faster than it arrives. And yet, there is a bitter irony. China itself once suffered humiliation under Western imperialism. They were carved up, exploited, weakened. They rebuilt themselves with strategy, nationalism, and iron discipline. Today, they are using the same tactics that were once used against them. They learned imperialism from the masters and perfected it. But despite all this, I am not hopeless, because Africans are waking up. The protests in Angola, the outrage across Kenya, the conversations happening online, the videos are circulating across the continent. The growing awareness that development without dignity is slavery. This awakening is the beginning of something powerful. Africa has options. Africa has alternatives. Africa has a future if we choose it. We can negotiate fairer deals. We can prioritize African workers. We can build using African engineers. We can create African banks for African infrastructure. We can elect leaders who read contracts, who defend sovereignty, who understand that a nation's dignity is worth more than a foreign loan. The question now is simple. Will Africa continue to bow? Or will Africa stand? Will we remain quiet like that Kenyan worker, surviving, enduring, apologizing? Or will we reclaim the dignity our ancestors fought for? We don't need fists. We need strategy. We need unity. We need Pan-African solidarity. We need leaders who care more about their people than photo ops. Because the West exploited us for centuries. And we cannot allow China or anyone to become our new master while we're still healing from old wounds. Development without sovereignty is not progress. It is colonization with good marketing. Our ancestors fought for political independence. Now it is our turn to fight for economic independence. The cameras are rolling. The world is watching. History is recording. What will Africa choose? But Africa's dilemma doesn't end with debt or humiliating viral videos. No, the real battle is much deeper. The real war is being fought in boardrooms, embassies, and ministerial offices where the fate of entire nations is traded like items in a supermarket. Because while the world watches the beating of one Kenyan worker, foreign powers are busy negotiating the price of Africa's future behind closed doors. And this is the painful truth. Africa is not losing because it is weak. Africa is losing because its leaders are playing on the wrong team. Think about it. Every major foreign power has a long-term plan. China has a 100-year plan. The European Union operates on decades-long economic blueprints. The United States has deep-rooted global strategies. But Africa? Many of our governments function on 5-year election cycles, short-term political survival, and quick-fix solutions that keep them in office, not solutions that build the continent. Foreign governments don't need to conquer Africa militarily. Our leaders hand over strategic assets willingly, hidden in the fine print of contracts the public never sees. And those contracts matter, because the cost of a hidden clause can be more destructive than a weapon. A single line of text buried in a loan agreement can decide who controls your ports, your land, your digital infrastructure, your minerals, your future. A nation does not fall when soldiers march in. A nation falls when its leaders sign the wrong papers. This is the new battlefield. And China understands this game well. Their strategy is simple. Identify a weak economy. Offer massive loans. Build flashy infrastructure. Ensure repayment becomes impossible. Seize key national assets or negotiate long-term control. This model has worked perfectly in several countries across Asia and the Pacific. Now the same playbook is unfolding in Africa, country by country. Our roads may look modern. Our bridges may look impressive. Our cities may look upgraded. But at what price? What does it mean when your national railway is operated at a loss and you cannot disclose the contract? What does it mean when your port is leased for 99 years? What does it mean when your mining sector is colonized without a single shot being fired? It means Africa is developing, but not for Africans. And let's be clear, China is not the villain here. China is doing what every global power does, protecting its interests, expand its influence, secure resources, strengthen its economy. The real villains are African leaders who exchange sovereignty for loans. The leaders who celebrate ribbon cuttings more than national ownership. The leaders who care more about megaprojects than the dignity of their own people. Because what does it say when a foreign employer can assault an African worker and walk away untouched? What does it say when the worker forgives, not because he wants to, but because poverty forces him to? It says we are losing more than money. It says we are losing dignity. It says we are losing leverage. It says we are losing sovereignty inch by inch. But something is changing. Africa is awakening. For the first time in decades, young Africans are not afraid to question the old narrative. They are asking, why are our resources exported raw? Why do foreign companies dominate every sector? Why do we depend on outside loans for basic development? Why are our leaders silent when our people are disrespected? This generation is different. They are connected. They are informed. They are bold. They are angry, and rightfully so. They do not fear telling the truth. They do not fear exposing corruption. They do not fear demanding accountability. For the first time, Africa's youth understand that dependence is not development. That roads built with foreign labor do not empower a nation. That bridges financed by foreign debt often lead to economic captivity. Those skyscrapers mean nothing when millions are hungry. And this is where the story shifts. Because Africa's awakening is not just cultural. It is strategic. Our youth are building their own tech startups. Our engineers are designing drones, satellites, and renewable energy systems. Our innovators are creating African payment systems, African e-commerce, African digital infrastructure. Our thinkers are calling for Pan-African trade, Pan-African finance, Pan-African industrialization. For the first time, Africans are realizing we do not need to beg. We do not need to borrow. We do not need to surrender ownership. We can build for ourselves. But this awakening will remain useless if it does not translate into political power. Because foreign governments do not fear African youth. They fear African governments led by African youth. Governments that cannot be bought. Governments that cannot be manipulated. Governments that prioritize citizens over foreign investors. Governments that say, if you want our minerals, you refine them here. If you want to build infrastructure, Africans must be employed. If you want access to our land, it must be on fair terms. If you disrespect our workers, you will face consequences. If you lend us money, the contract must be transparent. If you want partnership, you must honor our sovereignty. That is the Africa we must build. Not an Africa that bows. Not an Africa that begs. Not an Africa that apologizes after being insulted. But an Africa that negotiates like an equal. An Africa that stands with dignity. An Africa that understands its value. Because Africa is valuable. Africa is powerful. Africa is rich, not in potential, not in dreams, but in tangible, measurable global resources. The world knows it. The question is, do we? This is why moments like the Eldoret video matter. Because they expose what our leaders hide. They remind us of the imbalance. They force us to confront the truth behind development. They tell us one thing clearly. If Africa does not stand up now, it may never stand again. The next chapter of our struggle is not about guns. It is about contracts. It is about negotiation. It is about unity. It is about refusing to accept indignity in exchange for highways. It is about reclaiming the future.